Hello, I'm Rebecca, and today we are going to be talking about comma usage. So there are so many comma resources available on the internet, you might be wondering, why do we need another one? Well, my answer is because I think that in spite of all of the resources that are available, commas are still something that a lot of English writers struggle with. And that could be students or professional writers. A lot of people still struggle with commas. As for why we struggle so much with commas, I believe that the answer is the way that it's taught is fundamentally difficult for us to grasp. So any grammar guides that I have seen go through entire lists of comma usage rules, sometimes with weird names that are difficult to remember. And all in all, I think that a lot of comma guides are kind of missing the point of what makes commas useful or how we can use them practically. So that's what we want to get into today. So I'd like to start with a question. That question is, why are commas important? You might have heard this question answered in a couple of different ways. If you have seen the classic example of the sentence, "Let's eat, Grandma," with the comma removed, where the sentence then reads, "Let's eat, Grandma," this is sometimes held up as a reason why commas can save lives. However, this kind of missing comma is not a particularly common scenario, and this is not the type of writing that most of us are going to be doing for academic or school purposes, and so it's not necessarily that relevant to what we need to use commas for. The second example refers to why a comma might be necessary when putting items in a list. So if we say we invited the dogs, George, and Lenny, we are referring to three different entities: the dogs, and George, and Lenny. However, if that last comma is missing, then it can be misinterpreted so that we think that the dogs are actually named George and Lenny. So in that reading, it would say, we invited the dogs, George, and Lenny. So this is one way that a comma being missing could be confusing for a reader. And this is something that happens more often, but it's still not the type of thing that we usually think of when we're talking about academic or written English comma usage. So again, my question is, why are commas important? If you're sitting there thinking, well, why are commas important? Maybe they don't matter. How often is my reader going to misunderstand me just because of a comma or a missing comma? And the answer is, well, yeah, sometimes they don't matter that much. There are definitely situations where putting an extra comma or missing a comma is not going to alter your reader's understanding of your words that much. And we're going to take that into account while we're talking about how to use commas. So as we go through this discussion, we're going to consider the fundamental ways that commas are used as meaning-making devices, by which I mean the usages of commas that are actually going to affect your reader's understanding of your writing. But instead of talking about comma errors and, pitfalls to avoid, we're going to start from the bottom up, and we're just going to begin with a very simple sentence and see how we can add commas to it in a way that is going to be meaningful for your reader. So again, we're not going to look at mistakes to avoid, we're just going to look at how we can use commas. Suppose we begin with a simple sentence like, I was very tired. Well, if we want to add more descriptors to how I was feeling, we can add them using commas. So suppose we add sore and grumpy to my list. So then my sentence will say, I was very tired, sore, and grumpy. So we have added information using commas. The next thing we might do is, maybe we want to add some context to the beginning of the sentence. Let's add in the information, when I got home last night, comma, I was very tired. So here again, our very simple sentence, I was very tired, has extra information added onto it using a comma. Let's do this again, this time adding information to the end of the sentence. So I was very tired, comma, and I fell asleep with my socks on. So here we have added a complete new idea, falling asleep with my socks on, at the end of our sentence. And again, we have used a comma to be able to add this information. And finally, let's try putting it all together. So let's start with introductory information, the context, right? So when I got home last night, comma, then our main idea, I was very tired, sore, and grumpy. Like we did in the first one, we can add in extra descriptions, extra information about how I was feeling. And finally, we'll add on our second main idea that we just did, so comma, and I fell asleep with my socks on. So now the sentence that we're left with is much more complex and much more interesting than the sentence that we began with. We started by saying, I was very tired, and now the sentence says, when I got home last night, I was very tired, sore, and grumpy, and I fell asleep with my socks on. So this is a much more interesting sentence than we began with, and the way we were able to add all of this information to our very simple idea was by tacking them on using commas. So now let's go into a little bit more detail on each of the uses that we just went over. So different things that we can do with commas, or rather different stuff we can add to a main idea using commas. So in the first one, we added items to a list. So we started out with the sentence, I was very tired. And if we want to add more descriptors, we will basically be listing them. And so if I want to add descriptors sore and grumpy, then I end up with 3 items in my list. So for items in a list, we want to put commas in between each of the items so that your reader can very easily tell when we're shifting from one item in the list to the next item in the list. For instance, if we did not have the comma in between tired and sore, then the reader might get confused. They might read it as, I was very tired, sore, and grumpy. And that might end up being confusing. So whenever we have items in a list, if there are 3 or more items, we want to separate them using commas. The second thing that we used commas for was to add introductory information to the beginning of a sentence. Now you can use commas to add information anywhere in a sentence, but one of the most common places to put it is at the beginning. So we took our main sentence, I was very tired, and added the contextual information, when I got home last night. So what we did was we took our main idea and we wanted to add extra information to it, in this case at the beginning. And so we put a comma after the introductory information to make it clear that this is context and this is the main idea. So separating the context and the main idea, or the introductory information versus the main idea, by putting a comma in the middle, helps to signal to your reader that we're moving from extra information to the main idea. So in each of these cases, you will find that we are isolating the main idea as, the main thing that your reader needs to understand. And then anything else that we want to add to the sentence, we'll set them apart using commas. And this separation helps to signal to your reader what is the main idea that they need to be focusing on so that they don't get distracted by all of the extra information in the sentence. The third, what we did was add an entirely new idea to the end of our sentence. And this, again, we did by separating them with a comma. So our main idea that we began with was, I was very tired. And then we want to add the new idea, I fell asleep with my socks on. So if we want to make these two ideas play together in the same sentence instead of making them two separate sentences, then what we want to do is put a comma and some sort of a connecting word in between them. So we say, I was very tired, comma, and I fell asleep with my socks on. So this is a compound sentence when we take two main ideas and smush them into the same sentence together. And using a comma plus some sort of a connector word like that word and helps these ideas to play together in the sentence more easily. And so in this way, using commas and connectors, we can make a sentence more complex by putting in more than one idea. So instead of just saying, I was very tired, I fell asleep with my socks on. Now we can put them together and say, I was very tired and I fell asleep with my socks on. And then finally what we did is went ahead and put all of the above together. So we can add in our items in the list, we can put contextual introductory information at the beginning of the sentence, we can smush on an extra idea at the end, and what we will end up with is a much more complex and interesting sentence than what we began with. So we can end with, when I got home last night, I was very tired, sore, and grumpy, and I fell asleep with my socks on. So this is the type of sentence that we might find in a narrative. This is the type of sentence that we might tell a friend if we were describing what happened to us last night. And this ends up feeling a lot more natural because we naturally do put more than one idea into a single sentence or a single utterance. So it's very common for us to put ideas together, and when you put them down on paper, commas are how you connect ideas so that they can play together in the same sentence. I encourage you to try this yourself. Try taking a simple sentence and adding stuff to it using commas. So begin with something that does not have any commas in it, a very simple idea, and then we can make it more complex by adding stuff. You can add items in a list, introductory information, you can add a whole new idea to the end of your sentence, and then finally you can put it all together. So in the same way that we just did with I was very tired, suppose we start with a simple sentence like, I like ice cream. And then if I want to add items to a list, I can say, I like ice cream, waffles, and french fries. If I want to add introductory information to the beginning, perhaps I say, you know, I like ice cream, waffles, and french fries. And then if I want to add a new idea at the end, suppose I say, you know, I like ice cream, waffles, and french fries, but not all at the same time. So using these commas, I can put as much information into a sentence as I want to. And putting in the commas helps my reader to see where we are moving from one idea to the next so that the reader does not feel like they are getting lost, or they don't feel like we're just running on and adding more information without guiding them in terms of how they should be interpreting the relationships between each of the pieces of information that we are putting into our sentence. If you want to try this for yourself, go ahead and pause the video now. Try writing your own short sentence and then adding information to it using commas. So next, let's go ahead and take a look at a real-world example of a written passage that includes commas. Let's try and isolate and identify the way that each comma is being used so that we can see comma usage in practice. In this case, I'm taking a paragraph from the children's book, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, and let's go ahead and take a look at this paragraph and see how each of the commas is being used. In all his young life, Sylvester had never had a wish gratified so quickly. Then it struck him that magic must be at work, and he guessed that the magic must be in the remarkable-looking pebble, where indeed it was. To make a test, he put the pebble on the ground and said, I wish it would rain again. Nothing happened. But when he said the same thing holding the pebble in his hoof, the sky turned black, there was lightning and a clap of thunder, and the rain came shooting down. So the first comma here is in the sentence, then it struck him that magic must be at work, and he guessed that the magic must be in the remarkable-looking red pebble. So what is the use of this comma in this sentence? Thinking back to our examples before, this is the use that we were talking about when you add a new idea to the end of an original sentence. So if we think of the original sentence or the main idea as being, it struck him that magic must be at work, then the new idea that he's adding to the end is, he guessed the magic must be in the red pebble. So by putting in that comma and the connector word like and, we get to put two main ideas into the same sentence together, and your reader is not going to get confused. For the second comma, we see it in the sentence, to make a test, he put the pebble on the ground. So here, what is the use of this comma? As we saw in our example before, let's again look for the main idea of the sentence and then see what the comma is being used to add. So the main idea of the sentence is going to be, he put the pebble on the ground. And then the introductory information is to make a test. So the introductory information gets set aside with a comma so that your reader can focus on the main idea, which is he put the pebble on the ground. For comma number 3, we find it in the same sentence where Sylvester says, "I wish it would rain again." In this case, the comma is being used to set aside a quote, so spoken information, which we want to keep separate from the introductory information of Sylvester said. The 4th comma is in the next sentence. When he said the same thing holding the pebble in his hoof, the sky turned black, there was lightning and a clap of thunder, and the rain came shooting down. So, in this case, what is the use of the comma? Again, thinking back to our examples, let's look for the main idea of the sentence and then see what the comma is being used to add. So in this case, the main idea of the sentence is actually the end. So the sky turned black, there was lightning and a clap of thunder, and the rain came shooting down. That is our main idea, which means that the introductory information before the comma is basically extra, and it is added with that comma to keep it separate from the main idea. So when he said the same thing holding the pebble in his hoof, comma, and then we get our main idea. Finally, commas 5 and 6, which are in this same sentence, are being used to add items to a list. So in the end of this sentence, we have 3 ideas of what happened when Sylvester wished that it would rain. So first, the sky turned black. Second, there was lightning and a clap of thunder. And then third, the rain came shooting down. So we have 3 items in a list, and they are separated with commas so that your reader does not end up getting confused or missing the point of 3 different items happening at once. So the last thing I'd like to encourage you to do is go ahead and write a paragraph-long story of your own. It can include as many commas as you want. It can use the strategies and the purposes of commas that we have talked about in this video. Or if you're not very comfortable using commas, then don't. And then afterwards, I would recommend looking over your paragraph, either alone or with a friend, and if you have used commas, try isolating them and seeing the purpose behind each comma, the same way that we just did with our example from Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. Or if you do not have many commas in your paragraph at all, try revising some of your sentences after the fact to see if maybe you can add extra information into them using commas. Remember, the whole purpose of using commas is to let multiple ideas play together in the same sentence without confusing your reader. So adding information using commas is a way to make a sentence more complex or add detail to an idea. And doing this, we can make a paragraph or a sentence or any piece of writing more interesting and more complex. Well, thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned something about commas. And if you have any questions, I would do my best to answer them in the comments. Bye, guys.